My name is Amber Flores, and I spent months planning my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Not just any anniversary, an event so extravagant it could have been in a magazine, with 170 guests, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and a polished dance floor that I personally insisted be reinforced for the live band. I did all of it with my own money, $46,000. Every dollar, every decision, every detail had come from me. I thought they'd be thrilled. I thought they'd finally see how much I cared, how much effort I'd poured into something that was meant to celebrate them. Instead, the first call came like a punch I hadn't seen coming. Amber, honey, are you sure this is appropriate? My mother's voice was calm, but I could hear the condescension beneath it. I frowned at my phone. Mom, what do you mean? Her sigh was audible, the kind that carries a lifetime of judgment. A party this grand. For us. It's too much for you, Amber. You've gone overboard. I blinked, trying to process. Too much for me? I'd spent nearly $50,000, coordinated weeks of permits, decorators, and caterers, and she was telling me I'd gone overboard? Mom, I said carefully, I wanted to do this. I planned it. I booked the venue, the caterers, everything. There was a long pause. Then, you didn't have to. Her words didn't land the way she expected. My stomach twisted, a mixture of anger and disbelief. I know I didn't have to, I said softly. But I wanted to. I shouldn't have been surprised by the next line. We're still having the party, she said. It's just, maybe it's better if you don't come. I laughed. Not out of humor, but because the brain can't always process absurdity quickly. Better if I don't come? I repeated. I paid for everything, Mom. I made this happen. And you're telling me not to attend my own parents' celebration. Silence. Then laughter, not hers. My older sister, Marisol, appeared on speakerphone, her voice dripping with amusement. Oh, Amber, you really think this matters, she said lightly. You grew vegetables and paid for some fancy chairs. That's your contribution. Don't make me laugh. I stared at my phone. My hand shook. A notification popped up. Marisol had gone live. There she was, twirling barefoot in the very ballroom I had spent weeks negotiating and paying for. She flipped the camera to show the sparkling tables and the polished floor, laughing as she paraded around like she owned it all. Caption: Who knew farm girls could throw a party? Comments poured, and almost immediately. Wait, she paid for this. That's insane. Amber really got played. I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stared. Daniel, my boyfriend, stood beside me, jaw tight, hands clenched, silent but present. They're going to regret this, he whispered. I nodded slowly. We'll see. I went to my laptop and pulled up the catering invoice first. $18,500. Deposits paid, balances pending. I hovered my mouse over the payment confirmation, feeling the full weight of everything I had done for my family over the years. And then, deliberately, I clicked cancel. Refund pending. I opened the band's contract next. Clause 14B. Event contingent on final confirmation and day of coordination contact. That contact? Me. I sent a one-line email. Do not play. Contract revoked. I leaned back, breathing evenly. The alarm system I'd installed for emergencies in the ballroom sat idle, waiting. I toggled it off remotely. 10 minutes later, the silent, perfect room erupted with a shrill, screeching alarm. I didn't feel guilty. I had spent years being invisible, being taken for granted. They had treated me as expendable, as a wallet with dirt under my nails. I hadn't always had money. My 20s were spent in the fields, hands blistered and cracked, learning how to coax life from the stubborn soil of our farm. No investors, no safety net, just sweat, stubbornness, and determination. Eventually, the farm paid for itself, and then for me, and then, unknowingly, for them. Health insurance, roof repairs, college tuition, utilities, birthdays, Christmas dinners. Every single thing they asked, every favor they needed, I quietly provided, without thanks. And now, they laughed at me in a ballroom I had rented, decorated, and paid for. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I sat there, quiet, letting the reality sink in. The live stream continued. The comments kept coming. She deserves better. She shouldn't have done this alone. Something inside me, something that had been dormant under years of unacknowledged effort, finally settled. I wasn't powerless. They had underestimated me, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. I opened the folder where I stored every document, every receipt, every record of the money I had spent and the work I had done for them over the years. Roof repairs, college tuition, birthday gifts, medical bills, holiday dinners. Every transaction meticulously logged, every favor rendered invisible. And for the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't a tantrum. This was preparation. I had evidence, I had clarity, and now I had the choice to act. I typed one word back to Daniel, noted. Then I began planning, not for them, but for me. The live stream kept playing in the corner of my laptop, Marisol twirling like she was the queen of the ballroom. My blood ran cold, not from anger, but from the clarity settling in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fleeting lapse in judgment. They had planned this. The laughter, the public display, the erasure of me from the event I had made possible. I could almost hear the clinking of champagne glasses through the screen. My mother, always so composed in public, raising her glass with practiced smiles, letting everyone see the perfect family celebrating without me. And I had paid for it all. $46,000, I reminded myself again. Every table, every linen napkin, every tiny gold rim on a plate. All mine. All ignored. My phone buzzed. Another notification. A cousin, someone who had always been neutral, sent me a message. Amber, did you really pay for this? That's insane. I stared at the words, feeling a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. Yes, I had. And yes, they were deliberately erasing me. Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing mine briefly. They'll regret this, he said quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. First, I had to understand the full picture. I opened my email and began searching through years of transactions and correspondences. Health insurance for my parents. Paid. Roof repairs. Paid. College tuition for Marisol's twins. Paid. Holiday dinners. Paid. And never a single acknowledgement. Not one, thank you. Not one word of recognition. I leaned back, letting the weight of it all settle. I had spent decades being invisible, being the silent backbone, the provider, the one everyone relied on but no one seemed to see. My contributions had been practical, invisible, expected. And now, in the glow of the chandeliers I'd paid for, they mocked me. Publicly. With joy. But as the initial sting faded, something else came into focus, control. They had always assumed I would bend, that I would absorb the humiliation silently. They had always treated me as a tool, a wallet with dirt under her nails, a girl from the farm who knew how to get things done. That assumption had lasted far too long. I opened a folder I hadn't checked in months, a collection of planning documents, receipts, and correspondence that chronicled every financial decision I had ever made for them. Every bill, every payment, every emergency. I had logged it all meticulously, not out of mistrust, but because I had always liked order. And now that order became armor. Scrolling through, I found something that made my chest tighten. A Dropbox folder, shared accidentally by Marisol years ago, still synced to my laptop. Inside were files labeled with dates, planning notes, and edits. And there it was, 40th anniversary, final timeline, bullet points meticulously outlining the celebration. Notes about presentation, placement of tables, emphasis on family participation, and instructions to remove me from all public acknowledgement. I paused. Read it again. And again. Every word confirmed what I had begun to suspect. My family didn't just forget me. They had orchestrated it. My sister had manipulated the narrative. My mother had silently condoned it. And my father, well, he had been content to watch it unfold. They had rehearsed the moment, choreographed the humiliation down to every sparkling glass and polished floorboard. I closed the folder, took a deep breath, and let myself feel it fully. Betrayal. Yes, but also clarity. They underestimated me, and I would not be underestimated again. Daniel touched my shoulder. What are you going to do? I looked at him and smiled, not a smile of joy, but one of quiet determination. We do what we always should, I said. We take control. I pulled up the contracts, one by one. Catering, cancelled. Band, cancelled. Venue backup system. I toggled the alarms. Within minutes, the perfect ballroom erupted into chaos. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I just acted. Years of being invisible had taught me patience, timing, and precision. And while chaos erupted in the ballroom, I sat back and thought about the past. My life on the farm had not been easy. There had been days when frost crept across the glass of the greenhouse while I clutched my phone, listening to my father demand I handle a new problem. Insurance, repairs, emergencies. I had always said yes, always solved it, always quietly absorbed the weight without complaint. But tonight I didn't absorb. Tonight I acted. The alarm screaming across the ballroom was not punishment, it was clarity. A clear, undeniable message. I was no longer the invisible helper. I was no longer a tool to be used and dismissed. The live stream comments continued. She deserves better. That's her money. She doesn't owe them anything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The truth was already evident, echoing in the chaos I had orchestrated with quiet precision. I leaned back, letting the adrenaline fade. The betrayal had been raw, public, deliberate. But for the first time, I was awake to my own power. I wasn't going to fight them by their rules. I would set my own. And so, sitting there in the glow of a live-streamed betrayal, I made a decision. I would reclaim control, piece by piece. I would assert boundaries. I would confront them, not with anger, but with clarity. And most importantly, I would no longer let their laughter define my worth. The more I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It wasn't about a simple miscommunication or a family quirk. Every message, every post, every subtle exclusion was intentional. They had rehearsed this, written it into timelines and folders, and curated a version of reality where I didn't exist. I opened another file, an old email thread between Marisol and a college friend. The subject line, Farm Girl, fell for it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I read the words. Talk to Dad. He's fine cutting Amber out. Mom's pretending to feel bad, but honestly, she's relieved. Amber dropped $46K like a puppy wagging her tail. I read it twice, 3 times. The first time, disbelief. The second, a slow, rising anger. The third, cold clarity. This was deliberate. This was choreography. All those years I had been the strong one, the helper, the silent provider. They had assigned me a role. One that kept me busy, compliant, and invisible. They had counted on my patience, my sense of responsibility, my desire to make things right. And now, they had tried to erase me in public, in front of guests I had paid to attend. I closed the email, my mind ticking through possibilities. I could react in anger, scream, throw things. Or I could act with precision, with authority. Years of farm work had taught me one lesson above all. You prepare, you plan, you execute. Haphazard emotion gets you nothing. First, the party itself. I had already canceled the band and catering. Next, the venue. I opened my remote access to the backup systems, lighting, sound, climate controls. I didn't need to use them, but the option was there, a reminder that the illusion of control belonged to me, not them. Then I turned to finances. Every transfer I had made over the years, tuition, health bills, holiday dinners, repairs, utilities, was cataloged, documented, timestamped. Receipts, invoices, screenshots, PDFs, bank transfers. Everything. I started organizing them into a single folder, each file labeled clearly, roof repair $9,200 emergency. Marisol daycare deposit, college tuition. Health insurance premiums, 18 months. Every act of generosity, every financial burden I had quietly borne, documented with cold clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is noisy, clarity is silent. And I was ready for silence to speak louder than any live-streamed mockery ever could. Next, I confronted my past patterns. My parents had relied on me for years, not because they cared about me, but because I was reliable. I had said yes to everything. Fixing the roof, paying tuition, buying groceries, arranging gifts covering emergencies. I had quietly absorbed it all, thinking love was duty. But love without acknowledgement is exploitation. And now I had the proof to back up every silent frustration. I called Daniel over, showing him the folder. He didn't need words. He simply nodded, understanding that what I was holding was power, not revenge. "What now?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "We prepare for clarity," I said. "Not for punishment, not for shame. Just truth." I sent carefully worded emails and messages. "Do not play. Contract revoked." The ballroom alarms remained toggled off, an option for escalation I didn't need yet, but a reminder that control was in my hands. I began drafting a message to my family, not an outburst, not a demand, just an invitation. Family dinner in my place. Sunday, 6 p.m. Just talk. No emojis. No explanations. Curiosity would bring them. In the quiet of my kitchen, the weight lifted slightly. For the first time in decades, I felt the possibility of being seen. Not as the helper, not as the silent farm girl, not as the provider with boots, but as Amber Flores, a person with boundaries and a voice. I sat back, thinking of all the years they had treated me as expendable. The unspoken expectation that I would pay, provide, and disappear without complaint. The subtle undermining, the family jokes at my expense, the erasures and omissions. Every one of those moments now had context. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't too sensitive. They had deliberately cast me in a role that suited them, one that kept me compliant and invisible. And yet, I felt no bitterness. Not yet. Just determination. They had underestimated me, and I would not allow them to underestimate me again. I began reviewing contracts, checking details of all deposits and agreements, confirming cancellations. Each click of the mouse was deliberate, controlled, precise. I had learned to be meticulous on the farm. Irrigation, planting, harvesting, finances. The same skills applied here. Then I sat back and looked around my home, imagining the dinner I would host. Not for grandeur, not for appearances, but for honesty. A long wooden table, simple dishes, vegetables from my farm, freshly baked bread. Candles flickering in mason jars. No crystal chandeliers, no gold-rimmed plates. No pretense. Everything intentional, everything real. I thought of my family, and I realized something crucial. I wasn't preparing for them to apologize. I wasn't preparing for validation. I was preparing to reclaim my narrative, to set boundaries, and to take my own space. They had taken what they wanted for decades, and now the control was mine. I closed my laptop for the night. The live feed still ran somewhere, the balloons and tables still sparkling in the distance, a public display of celebration I had paid for but would never attend. And I slept. Not easily, not peacefully, but with a sense of quiet purpose. Tomorrow, I would begin assembling the truth. Piece by piece, document by document, every omission, every slight, every public humiliation meticulously recorded. And when my family arrived on Sunday, they would be greeted not with anger, but with clarity. I wasn't preparing for chaos. I was preparing for resolution. Sunday arrived with a pale morning sun stretching over the fields. I had prepared a table in the barn. Not polished, not perfect, but honest. A long slab of reclaimed wood rested on sawhorses, its surface uneven, edges raw. Candles flickered in mason jars. Roasted vegetables filled large serving dishes. Herb-roasted chicken smoked in the oven. Bread from the local bakery lined a basket. And apple pie sat waiting from a neighbor's orchard. Everything I prepared was real, grounded, unpretentious, just like me. When the first car rolled up, my mother stepped out, carefully carrying a pie wrapped in foil. Her practiced smile was in place. "Amber, I just thought," she started. I didn't respond. I simply nodded, letting her read the situation herself. Behind her, my father followed, his hands on the steering wheel like he owned the space, like he had always done. And then Marisol, eyes sharp, lips pressed thin, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My pulse stayed steady. I had anticipated their arrival, anticipated their reactions. I would not allow them to see me rattle. "Sit anywhere," I said simply, gesturing toward the table. They hesitated, I scanning the space like it might bite. The barn was quieter than the ballroom, quieter than the online commentary, quieter than years of expectation. The silence carried its own weight, one they hadn't prepared for. We thought we'd discuss the anniversary," my mother started, her voice carefully even. I shook my head gently. Not the anniversary. That story has been told. This, I said, gesturing to the table and the food, is about truth. About what actually happened. About what was done, who did it, and who was invisible in the process. Marisol snorted. Invisible? Really? I didn't answer immediately. I reached under the table and pulled out the thick folder I had assembled over the past days. Receipts, emails, bank transfers, every act of financial support I had quietly provided. I set it on the table with a soft thud that seemed louder than it was. You want invisible? Here it is, I said calmly. I flipped the folder open, page by page. Roof repair, health insurance, college tuition, utilities, holiday dinners. Every time they had relied on me, every time they had erased my contributions or mocked me publicly, documented in neat order. Amber, this is ridiculous, my father said, waving a hand. Your listing numbers. Does this make you a hero? No, I replied evenly. It makes me precise. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to show clarity. Every favor, every payment, every emergency I handled, without recognition, without thanks, is documented here. My mother's fingers tightened around her glass. Marisol leaned forward, her expression tight. You think this proves something? I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. It proves that invisibility is a choice, not a role you can assign. And it proves that I am no longer willing to play a part you wrote for me. I have boundaries now, and they start with honesty. I turned the pages slowly, letting each one land. I paid for the anniversary venue. I planned every detail. And yet, the video posted online showed me erased. The live stream mocked me while you laughed, claiming I didn't matter. That is deliberate. That is choreography. Marisol's face twitched. You're being dramatic. No, I said softly. I'm being factual. I slid the email across the table, the one Marisol had sent to a friend years ago, outlining the plan to exclude me and erase my contribution. Read it. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't a joke. This was intentional. And this is the result of choosing to ignore me all these years. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother reached toward me. Amber, sweetheart. I raised a hand, gently but firmly. Do not touch me. You do not get to erase me and then offer comfort. You do not get to manipulate and then apologize. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that demands attention. Not the polite silence of a party, not the hum of small talk. This was clarity in its purest form. I stood, palms resting on the rough wood of a table. I am done being invisible. I am done being erased. And I am done paying for validation I will never receive. I slid 3 envelopes across the table. Legal documents, access terminations, utility account closures, loan revocations. Each one a boundary, each one a statement. I am not your ATM. I am not your silent helper. I am Amber Flores, and my contributions will no longer be taken for granted. My mother picked one up, trembling. You can't just cut us off, she said. I already have, I replied. Calmly, firmly. Marisol's voice cracked. We're family. I looked her straight in the eye. We share blood. Family doesn't make you disposable. Family doesn't erase the ones who make the world work while you play pretend. You made your choice years ago. I'm just responding with clarity now. I sat down only after they had absorbed the words, after the weight of decades had settled into the room. Silence stretched. No shouting, no pleading, just the recognition of truth. The barn was cold in the best way, the cold of reality finally arriving, the heat of false celebration gone. And as I looked around, I realized something important. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't enacting revenge. I was reclaiming myself. Every action, every document, every word spoken was for me. Not for drama, not for acknowledgement, but for the quiet, unshakable peace of finally being seen on my own terms. For the first time, I felt it freedom. After the barn dinner, the air felt different, lighter, sharper, cleaner. The truth had landed, and my family had no script left to follow. They could squirm, they could protest, they could try to gaslight, but the foundation of manipulation they had built over decades had finally been exposed. I returned to the farmhouse, letting the quiet settle over the fields. Daniel followed, carrying the leftover bread and jars of roasted vegetables. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He understood that tonight wasn't about words. It was about presence, about recognition, about finally drawing a line that had been ignored for too long. I walked through the greenhouse, hands brushing the leaves, smelling the soil, feeling the pulse of growth. For years, I had poured sweat, blood, and patience into this land. Every crop, every row, every seed planted carried a part of me that had always been invisible to the people who should have valued it most. And tonight, the metaphor finally felt complete. I was tending my own life, my own boundaries, my own harvest. The legal documents remained in their envelopes on the table in the barn. Termination of access, loan revocations, utility closures. I had sent copies to my attorney, not as an act of cruelty, but as a declaration of independence. No one could manipulate me, erase me, or exploit me again. The next morning, I walked the fields under the rising sun. Mist hung low over the green rows, dew dripping from leaves. I thought about my family and the decades of silent service, and I felt no resentment, only clarity. Love, when mixed with manipulation, is not love at all. What I had learned was that boundaries weren't walls, they were protection, nourishment for what truly mattered. Over the next week, the phone stopped buzzing with urgent needs. No messages about broken roofs, unpaid tuition, or emergencies. The silence was striking. Not painful, not lonely, but freeing. I realized I had been carrying their expectations like a backpack of stones, each request a weight I didn't know. And now, for the first time, I had laid it down. I began to reorganize my life around myself, rather than their assumptions. I expanded the greenhouse, investing in better irrigation and new seeds. I repaired old tractors and sold the outdated ones. I painted the sign at the entrance of the farm. Simple, bold, white letters on reclaimed wood. We grow food. That was all it needed to say. No apology, no explanation, no justification. The land would speak for itself. Then came the subtle reminders of life moving forward. The barista at the corner coffee shop handed me a pastry one morning, whispering, "They messed with the wrong one." I smiled and paid anyway. Small moments like these were proof that the world acknowledged effort, integrity, and honesty, even when family did not. And then came the messages. Marisol called first, her voice overly calm. "Let's reset. You're still my sister." I let the phone ring until it stopped, saved it under Delusion MP3. My mother came to the gate another day, pie in hand, as if the gesture could undo decades of erasure. I stayed inside. I didn't open the gate. I didn't need to. "You threw me away first," I said aloud to the empty fields. She heard me, or didn't, irrelevant. Boundaries are not for them, they are for me. Even my father tried again, this time with a formal letter from his lawyer. Threats of defamation, claims of playing recorded conversations. He wanted to protect his reputation. I laughed softly, imagining all the times he had called me a wallet with boots, expecting silence. I sent the letter to my attorney without hesitation. His legal threats mattered only to him. My peace was untouched. I changed my phone number, not out of fear but completion. A symbolic gesture, a declaration of a new era. I kept only 5 contacts, all people who respected boundaries and didn't carry the weight of entitlement. No one from the old family dynamics remained. The chains of expectation had been broken. Life began to hum with a quiet rhythm, grounded in choice and autonomy. I planted a new orchard in the south field, selecting varieties that would thrive and nourish. I repaired the barn roof, painted the porch, and organized tools with meticulous care. Every act was deliberate, intentional, free of obligation. The farm had always been my refuge, but now it became a fortress of self-determination. One afternoon, a little girl came by, watching me unload crates of vegetables with her grandfather. She asked innocently, "Why doesn't your family help you?" The grandfather hushed her, embarrassed. I smiled, wiping dirt from my hands. "Some people plant weeds and call them roses," I said. "Here we only grow what feeds us back." She grinned, understanding more than she realized. And I understood, too. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't need applause or acknowledgement. It was quiet, stubborn, rooted in reality and boundaries. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what others took from me, nor by what they claimed I owed. I was defined by my choices, my labor, and my clarity. I walked the fields alone at sunset, golden light spilling across rows of crops. I thought about the family that had taken and erased me, and I felt neither anger nor bitterness. I felt completion. I had harvested not only the fruits of the soil but the fruits of my own resolve. I was free, grounded, and whole. The next morning, the sun rose over the farm in muted gold, spilling light over rows of vegetables and newly planted orchard trees. I moved through the greenhouse, hands brushing leaves, feeling the pulse of growth under my fingertips. Everything I touched felt alive, real mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't tending to their needs, their crises, their expectations. I was tending to mine. Daniel leaned against the doorway, coffee cup in hand. "Looks like peace is finally settling in," he said softly. I nodded, not because it was easy, but because it was intentional. Peace wasn't a gift. It was a choice, cultivated like the soil beneath our feet. The envelopes from the barn dinner, legal notices, account terminations, and access revocations, remained unopened on my desk. They were more than documents. They were symbols. Symbols of boundaries drawn, of roles refused, of decades of silent exploitation now catalogued, closed, and shelved. I didn't open them to gloat. I opened them in my mind as markers of freedom, reminders that I could no longer be manipulated or erased. Life moved quietly but with purpose. I expanded the greenhouse, installing new irrigation lines and replacing old equipment with machinery that could do the work of three. I planted seeds in neat rows, the earth welcoming them as if it recognized the care and clarity behind each one. I repaired the barn roof myself, painted the porch, and tended to the compost piles with meticulous care. Every act was deliberate, every gesture rooted in autonomy. Word spread quietly about the farm, not because I posted online, not because I sought attention, but because people noticed consistency, integrity, and effort. Customers came for fresh vegetables, neighbors came to admire the orchard, and slowly, the farm became a hub for community, not a place of obligation, but a place of choice. The phone remained quiet. Marisol's calls, my mother's pie deliveries, my father's legal threats, all ceased eventually. They had expected me to bend, to beg, to negotiate, but I had chosen clarity instead of chaos, boundaries instead of bargaining. And in that silence, I felt liberation. One afternoon, a little girl came with her grandfather to watch me work. "Why doesn't your family help you?" she asked innocently, curiosity in her eyes. Her grandfather sighed softly, embarrassed. I smiled, brushing dirt from my hands. "Some people plant weeds and call them roses," I said gently. "Here, we only grow what feeds us back." She nodded, grinning, and I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I wasn't the farm girl with boots, the silent provider, or the invisible helper. I wasn't defined by their needs or their expectations. I was Amber Flores, a woman who had faced deliberate erasure and emerged with clarity, autonomy, and dignity. I walked the fields at dusk, golden light brushing the green leaves, listening to the soft rustle of the crops. The barn, the orchard, the greenhouse, they were all reminders of my choices. Every row planted, every repair completed, every meal prepared was proof that I no longer lived under anyone else's narrative. And yet, I didn't feel anger. Not really. I felt resolution. I had done what needed to be done. I had confronted manipulation, exposed deliberate erasure, and taken control of my life. I had drawn boundaries, and in doing so, I had protected not just my resources but my peace. That evening, I sat at the edge of the porch, Daniel beside me, a warm breeze brushing past. "You look different," he said. "Freer." I smiled, letting the quiet wash over me. 4 years, I had measured myself by the standards they set. Now I measure myself by my own values, integrity, effort, and self-respect. I thought about them, my mother, father, and sister, and felt something surprising, compassion tempered by firm resolve. They had made choices that hurt me, but I had made choices that saved me. And sometimes, letting go is the kindest act you can offer yourself and others. The farm hummed quietly around me, life continuing in steady, deliberate rhythms. Chickens clucked softly, leaves swayed in the wind, and the greenhouse glass reflected the last light of the day. I had finally understood. Peace doesn't arrive with recognition. It arrives when you stop giving your power away. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The burden of obligation, the weight of expectation, the sting of betrayal, they all rested now behind me. In their place was space, sunlight, growth, and clarity. I had done more than survive. I had reclaimed myself. As night fell, I walked through the orchard, the rows of young trees standing tall and straight, shadows stretching across the earth. This was my harvest, not theirs. Every leaf, every branch, every fruit was a testament to choice, care, and resilience. I stopped at the barn door, looking back at the table I had set for truth. It was empty now, the envelopes gone, the dinner done, but the message remained. I didn't need applause, acknowledgement, or validation. I had written my story, and this chapter ended on my terms. I returned to the farmhouse, tired but unburdened. I slept deeply that night, without alarms, messages, or obligations. No one could disturb the peace I had cultivated. And for the first time in my life, I slept not as a helper, not as an invisible contributor, but as Amber Flores, a woman who had harvested her own life, her own boundaries, her own freedom. And that, I realized, was enough.